Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABM Answered, the quickfire demand generation ABM video series. Today, I'm excited to be joined by someone who has generously helped me over the last year with advice and sharing his wisdom, Evan Stinson, who is head of marketing at OneTrack, or OneTrack.ai, I guess, if you're going to jump on that bandwagon. How are you doing, Evan? Did I miss anything? Did you want to add anything to that?
No, you killed it, Sam. I appreciate you inviting me on and being here today.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited. So to run you and viewers through the rules again, Evan in this case will be given 7 questions to respond to, all about account-based marketing and demand generation. The questions have come from or been adapted based on the data that we've collected at mixed reality rooms, where over 1,000 marketers have gone through and simply stated what their biggest headaches and struggles are at the moment with demand gen and ABM. So, I guess if you're ready to rock and roll, Evan, I'll dive straight into question 1.
Yeah, let's do it.
Problem 1 is knowing where to start. So I guess ground zero, the question, when implementing like an ABM program, what do the first steps look like? What are the goals that are important to align on? And I presume, like, if you've just set up an ABM program, what kind of like timelines are you hoping to work to like prove whether it's a success or not?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I'll try to avoid the classic "it depends" answer, but I think with any program, you got to start with what the hell does ABM actually look like in your company? Because I think everyone has different definitions, right? I have a different definition. You probably do too. So number one is it one-to-one at your company? Is it persona-based and vertical-based at your company? Like, what does that look like? So I think that's going to dictate all of the tactics. And then from, I think, more of a strategic standpoint, figure out what the problem is you're looking to solve, right? I think every company has different go-to-market strategies. So one company might be struggling with like slow win rates and sales cycles because it's super competitive, and they're going to want to really focus on in-pipeline acceleration and how can we help marketing be more of like a sales accelerator, versus another company who's more freemium is like, and want to move up market, they might be thinking more, how do we then go take our message that's already pretty viral because it's freemium, and then how do we just add gas to that fire with these target accounts? So like very different motions there, and I think very different tactics that go along with that. So you got to figure out what that looks like. And then, I mean, timeline standpoint, I like to like start things quick and dirty. I think depending on your sales cycle, 30 to 90 days, but try and figure out something that works and like leading indicator success within 30 days. Otherwise, like pivot. But it really depends on your program. Like if you're doing a podcast, that might be a little longer, but you could always measure things by, are we getting the right guests onto our podcast? Are we getting good content out of these? Are people following up after these, and are these actually generating actions? If you're doing ads, you can look at, are we reaching the right people? Is the message resonating? I think there's like positive signals you can look for in any program, but I think 30 days is figure out what that like leading indicator of success looks like.
Solid answer. And I'm trying not to interrupt just so we can get those as solid clips. A follow-on question, might edit it out, so if you don't know or whatever, I'm just curious to ask, what, you mentioned a good point there. It's like, do we pick one-to-one and go after like those top tier 1 accounts, or do we go arguably programmatic, like one-to-many at the bottom? So I guess you've got top down, bottom up. What determines where you start? Because it's a question that I got asked this week, and I wasn't too sure, to be honest. It's like, what? Yeah.
I think, I mean, again, it's like go-to-market motion. So for my company, for instance, I think we're a small company. It's just me and one other marketer. Our budgets aren't super big, so we don't have the budget to really go after this really programmatic approach. We also don't have the budget to really spend tons and tons of money on specific accounts. So like we're focused on expansion within current customers because there's a lot of upside with our current enterprise customers. So I think that kind of dictates just the go-to-market approach. I think like in general, I kind of think of one-to-one as actually ABM. Everything else is just like good targeted demand gen. So I think like most companies probably disagree with that because of how they're structured. But in general, if you're not doing one-to-one, it's not really account-based marketing. You're just doing demand gen with other filters on top of it. So like I think the answer is both, but depending on your resources, your team allocation, like that kind of stuff, really depends on, again, What problem are you trying to solve? In my case, I'm going very one-to-one because I can't go spend $15K a month on advertising and do all these events and all these things that I'd like to do in that programmatic kind of approach.
Interesting. I've got a lot of follow-on questions, but I'm just going to plow through these questions as promised. Great answer. Challenge 2, which I guess is the next stage, and a lot of companies are experiencing it right now, like the middle of the funnel jam. So nurturing is another word for it, or just how to stay top of mind. So the question to you is, how can go-to-market teams accelerate kind of deal velocity, unblock those accounts that get stuck after the initial contact has been made?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem I think everyone's facing right now. It feels like deals never seem to close on time. Everything's slipping. So I think it's a couple of things. I really like the surround sound approach for in-pipeline deals, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think number one is work with sales for these accounts. And I don't think you can do it with every account unless you have a really big sales team. Again, I don't, so I'm speaking from my experience. But work with sales on the accounts that you absolutely have to close. Figure out how to make a business case with that champion or with that buying committee at that account. And I think Nate Nasrallah from Fluent is really good at this. Is something that I've been studying a lot, of just how do you turn the business case into your entire sales process. And I think if you can work with sales for that, that drives urgency, that drives like executive buy-in. It's a one-page document that shows who's in the deal, what the problems are, the priorities, what business metric you are impacting, and it's all co-created with that kind of champion so that they can sell when you're not in the room. So I think that's number one, and that's not necessarily ABM, but just like good business practice in general. I think other than that, I talked about the surround sound approach. So you have that urgency with that business case. Can you work with sales, figure out what their priorities are, and then pick out relevant case studies, relevant quotes, relevant content, serve that up and kind of surround sound via ads, get them on your email list somehow and do that. As you kind of move them through, can you weave in-person experiences to like get things moving? So maybe you're going to a conference that they might be going to. Maybe you want to do an in-person like dinner roadshow. Like maybe you have a lot of customers in New York and you want to go do a dinner in New York. I think there's a lot of things that you can do to keep things moving. So in general, kind of foundational business process, I think it's really important to like co-create that to drive urgency. I think then surround sound, stay top of mind, stay in front of them. And then if you can weave in-person experiences into that, I think that's a no-brainer. I'm not a huge like conference trade show booth guy, but I think there's definitely a lot of value to figuring out like small, intimate, in-person stuff.
For sure, I'm seeing that too. Surround sound is quite a nice rebrand for nurturing. I feel like that gets overused. Awesome. Challenge 3 is upselling within enterprises. So this actually came from Christina Jaramillo, who I think was very bullish on this, that a lot of companies are struggling with it at the moment. So yeah, just kind of what are some of the effective ways to help, upsell your products and services, not necessarily at OneTrack, but any organization. And, how do you know when it's time to increase the pricing of your offer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is tough because I think moving up market is typically like, especially in the VC world, it comes from the VCs. They're like, hey, it's time to move up market so we can get better returns on our investment. But I think if you take that out of the equation, like there's signals you can look for when it comes to when it's time. So I've always worked in enterprise. So again, this is me just off the cuff, but I think, are you starting to get some enterprise traction? Like your bread and butter is SMB, but are you getting some enterprise deals in your pipeline that look promising? I think if you are, then you probably need to dig deeper into that. Like where are they coming from? What problem are they looking to solve? Is your product in a good place to even support the enterprise? Are you working on SOC 2? Or do you have like more of a holistic platform versus maybe a best in breed solution that really speaks to the SMB market? I don't think a lot of enterprise really like that. I mean, it's really outdated, but the single source of truth message, I think everyone's talking about that. But if you can do that really well and get through that bloated tech stack, that's really important. So I think those are some things to think about before you go move up market. I think when it comes to how to actually do it, again, it's such a wishy-washy answer, but it depends on your go-to-market. But I think from my experience in the enterprise world, I'm going to talk about because we're big on expansion, I mentioned. So how do I work really closely with sales and CS to figure out for each account, what do they care about? What pain points are we solving? What business metrics are we impacting? So I think everyone gets really lost in, what does my solution do? What specific pain point does it solve? I think that's good, but I think the next level up from that and what ABM can really help drive is like executive engagement and influence. And that's when you have to start figuring out, what business metrics are you actually impacting? So go on an account by account basis, or in some cases you can go, persona or vertical by vertical and figure out what that is, have a hypothesis, and then create content that speaks to that. Maybe you do a webinar with a target persona that's a chief operating officer, and you figure that out and like create a bunch of content off that. Maybe you do ads, maybe you do emails, all the different tactics you can do. But those are some of the things I'd be thinking about.
Also, and on the pricing side of things, this is such a. I'm going to argue that every company does this when it gets to enterprise sales, but it's just a case of going like, oh, it's this much kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's great to base these things on logic and work like backwards. I think like the default in tech is like, hey, we 10x whatever results, so you pay us 10th of the value that we've provided. How do you do pricing? Or is it kind of similar to like every other, like what I just mentioned? Is it a case of just,
Yeah.
well, you mentioned the metrics and working backwards and seeing what value you provided?
Yeah, I think this is where I bow out and really partner with finance, who knows what they're talking about there. But I
Right.
don't think just picking a number out of the air and saying we're going to charge $5,000 a month, I don't think that's effective. But I also don't necessarily know if backtracking off of ROI is the right call, because quite frankly, a lot of companies don't believe companies' ROI. Like, I could say I'm going to 10x your revenue. I don't really believe that. So I think you have to do some sort of value assessment that's not strictly ROI based. And I think part of this is also starting small and like finding a cohort and testing. So sometimes you might just have to like pick a number out of a hat, but then you do kind of customer research and you figure out, are they actually willing to pay that? Are they willing to pay more? Surprisingly, like some customers are actually saying like, yeah, we'd actually pay you more for your software. So maybe it's time to upgrade your pricing in that sense. So I don't know. It's not a great answer, but try and work with finance when you can. And if not, then just test and see what you can do and what the market says.
No, I think that is a good answer. I've on this like journey, I've been surprised by how many, when you get true customer champions that really want to see you do well, it's not a case of like them trying to gouge you for every like some companies do gouge you for every cent and knock you down. But when you find someone that loves your product, they really do try and help and kind of give you some strong indicators without directly saying, hey, you could double. In the early days, we had one customer, and we effectively kind of like doubled our pricing based off like the indicators from it. So yeah, I think that's a solid answer. The last thing I'll quickly say on that, and then we'll move on. Multi-threading. Are you big on multi-threading? Like running people up from like in other departments from the beginning, or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you have to, especially in enterprise deals. Which again, I've always worked in enterprise, so I'm big on multi-threading. Yeah. I think if someone comes inbound for us, it could be an operations manager or a general manager at a certain site, but what we actually need to do is figure out, how do we get all of the people that our platform can impact onto that either first call or second call. So I think in the first call, I like to send one, do your research, try and get on LinkedIn Sales Nav, do whatever, say, hey, I'm meeting with Sam, and I think you could also get value based on XYZ. I think aside from that, I like to send a 24 hours before a meeting, I send a little email that says, hey, looking forward to it. We're going to go over XYZ. Oftentimes I find that XYZ personas can also give value. I noticed that, insert person's name works closely with you. Do you think it'd be worth adding to the call? Oftentimes they'll say yes. And then afterwards, I think when you're on the call, you've got to be pushing in those like next steps. And again, more of a sales thing than a marketing thing, but always be pushing for, are there other people that you think could get value from this based on your goals? I think that like have a hypothesis and come up with that. And I think oftentimes you can like span different departments, but you have to be super proactive there, because if you're focusing or you're relying on one person to spread the message of $100,000 tool within their account, like you're probably not going to close things super fast. Everyone's got 1,000 things going on. You have to like take the bull by the horns and be a little more proactive with it.
For sure, solid answer. Right, okay, we'll keep going. Problem 4 was implementation of AI. So it's not really a problem. It's more of like every marketer, every ABMer wants to use AI for, all the benefits. But like, how would you, I guess, go about doing it? Are you using AI? Obviously, OneTrack.ai is an artificially intelligent based company. But yeah, how are you using it in your flows, and like, also, where do you think it's going? Like, what are the steps, and like, how important do you think it will be in over the next 5 years? So,
Yeah, I mean, AI is blown up. I think everyone's talking about it. So I think it comes with a couple of things. There's a lot of tools out there that are really big on in the LinkedIn sphere. Everyone's talking about, like Clay, for instance, I think is one that everyone's talking about with automated outreach and enriching and all those things. So I don't personally use it, but I know a lot of people that do, and I can see the value there. For me personally, I just use straight up Chat GPT, and I don't use it to write things. I actually use it to do research on accounts or people. So I'll put in maybe a target account and say, analyze all of their press releases over the last 6 months, pick out the top 10 relevant business themes that align with our product or service, because we've trained an AI or like a GPT model based on what our company does. So we'll do things like that to figure out quickly what are some messaging things that align with executive outcomes that we can message to. I do the same thing for people. Like you can analyze their LinkedIn posts. You can analyze if they've been on podcasts, and you can pull transcripts down and just like pick out quotes, pick out things they care about that align with what I do. And then it'll spit out a couple of bullet points. You workshop those, you put that into a cold email template or to something, and you have something that's like much more personalized that I don't have to spend 6 hours like digging through press releases and podcast transcripts to find. I can just throw that in ChatGPT quickly and get bullet points out of.
Sure, that's super smart on programming your own GPT with the prompts of OneTrack. Hopefully, you don't get spammed after this episode and someone's like pulled the transcript. But yeah, apologize for that if you do. Challenge 5: how much info to give sales? So too much, they stop paying attention. Too little, outreach kind of suffers. Well, you get no personalization. How do you balance that act?
Yeah, I think I found in a past role of mine that we had really great data, or we thought was really great data, but the sales team just didn't really give a shit about it. We had like person level engagement on LinkedIn ads and all these kind of things, which we were like, yeah, they're going to love this. Turns out they didn't really care at all, which I think some sales teams would care about that. Other teams didn't. This one just so happened to not. So I think it's really important to co-create stuff with your sales team. Like, don't just assume that your sales team's going to love a certain amount of data. Some sellers are hunters. Some sellers need things to be given to them or want things to be given to them, and some are somewhere in between. So figure out what they care about, and then don't just kind of take their word for it. I think it's really important to work with leadership to document stuff. So it kind of takes the emotion out of it. You can't say, well, this lead sucks because they didn't move to the next stage, or we didn't get the right data from marketing to do outreach. It's no, we talked about that. These are the signals that we're looking for intent. These are the things we look for like firmographic ICP. I'm talking more like demand gen, I guess, in this sense, but this is what constitutes a quality lead. These are the quality engagement signals that we care about and we've kind of worked on together. So that way it takes the emotion out of it. You're just saying, yeah, based on their title, their XYZ, they engaged on XYZ post, they looked at our pricing page. That means you do X. So like kind of creating playbooks based on that. And again, I think you have to work really closely with sales, and like most sellers aren't just going to come to the table and say, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Let's figure this out. You have to like kind of coach them on why this matters and what's important. But I think it's really important to like do that internal work, because if you don't, then you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Wow, it's like we're babysitting sales. But I get that. Do you have like three? Like, would you try and give them like at least 3 points, or like what? So, for example, maybe 1 point on why our feature set is better than the competition, or one thing to do with like the company. They've just released a company report, and this information on their CSR thing is relevant, and maybe we could work it in like that. Sorry, I didn't really think this question through, but it's more of like, is there like a 3 bullet point, like, right, we need one hero feature to push, we need one news article, and then one like kind of blog post that one of the stakeholders have mentioned, or am I oversimplifying things?
No, I don't think you're oversimplifying. I think so. There's a difference between like intent data you're trying to give to sales to talk about
Yeah.
outreach, and then another one for like, I don't know, someone has come to us and then we need to figure out like what's the right path forward. So like intent signals, I would say pricing pages and solution pages for your first party website. That's super important.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people really buy into like Bombora, and I think that's important, but at a small startup like where we're at, it's not where we're at right now. So I think first party data as much as you can. Are people actively looking for you and what are they looking for? And then try and tie that into what is your strategic narrative and what does that value prop look like? So I try and give sales like based on what they're looking at, what they have shown to be like caring about on our website. Here's the value props that we have that are kind of canned. And then also here is something that maybe their CEO talked about in a press release. So if they're talking about improving their safety record, safety is something that OneTrack does, we might title an email like, I don't know, CEO's comments. Hey, your CEO recently said they want to improve safety, blah, 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 blah. Here's how OneTrack can help. So that way it's a little more personalized. But yeah, I think 3 to 5 bullet points is probably what you want to give to sales. You don't want to overwhelm them with like 50 things that they need to go sort through. You have to make it like pretty easy to hunt and peck. And then unfortunately, it's just like an iterative process. You don't get it right on the first time, and you're going to have to constantly change that up for every subsequent email. But yeah, it's kind of a moving target in that sense.
Okay. Problem 6, tracking and sorry, I'm conscious of time. Tracking and reporting ROI. So how can we improve like KPI effectiveness? Like with reporting, do you use any certain tools that are like a godsend to you? Do you do it all manually in spreadsheets? Do you not trust data? Yeah, just what's the flow, Evan?
No, I'm super scrappy, so I'll keep it short here. I think in my stage, in my startup stage, keep it easy and scrappy. Don't overcomplicate things. Are you reaching the right people? Is the message resonating? Is it driving some sort of action? So you can get that out of the ad platforms. You can get that out of your email platform, whatever it is. Are you reaching the right people? Is it resonating? Is it driving some sort of action, whether it's content, whether it's meetings, whatever that looks like? Figure out how to like measure that and track that. And then the lagging indicators of like pipeline stages and revenue from target accounts, that's can be from your CRM. Tag all your accounts with target accounts, put them into a cohort, easy enough to see, are they progressing through your pipeline stages? What's the revenue look like? I like to keep it there just because I don't have $50,000 to go dump into an analytics platform. But yeah.
Also, arguably, do you need 50 that like do you need an analytics platform? Like they're the most important metrics that are going to push the needle forward for the company, aren't they?
Yeah.
Final question, and this is from Brandon. I always butcher his last name, but Brandon Ali Solgu. He's the ABM manager at Image Trends. Lovely chap. He said, how wide do you push an email campaign as part of an ABM sort of strategy or campaign? So obviously you can pull in all sorts of stakeholders. And we did speak about multi-threading a bit earlier. But like, I guess, yeah, from the offset, all right, let's just pick one account. Pick one account in your head that you want to go after. Like, what's the play there? Who are you going after, and how are you doing it, and on what cadence?
Yeah, I would switch things out into, and again, you don't really know this, but who is your end user going to be? Who's your decision maker going to be? Who's going to be the champion? You probably have some sort of data, or at least a hypothesis on that, and then you do your research, figure out what your value props are to each of those groups. I think for an email campaign, that's probably where I'd start. For advertising, depending on your budget, that's probably where I'd start too. You can also just focus only in on like go deep on champions. I think it's more effective to market to your champions as opposed to end users or decision makers out of the gate anyway. Don't come at me in the comments, but out of the gate, I think that's more important because that's who is going to be pushing you internally. So that's where I would start. I think you can go as wide as you want to. I would caution not to go too wide because then you start defeating the purpose of ABM. Like if you're one marketer with one seller trying to pull off a program, like pick 10 people that you can research, pick 5 people you can research, don't pick 50 because, again, I don't have that much time to figure out custom personalized things, which I consider ABM to be highly personalized. You can go targeted demand gen, but that's another episode for another day.
For sure. And let's be slightly controversial and also oversimplify things. Let's say you've got your champions and then you've got secondary people. So like the CFO of finance or other departments you don't usually sell to, they're normally an upsell. Do you do you send them, the secondary people, kind of like an email saying, hey, we're reaching out to this person, keep an eye out, in like 3 to 6 months we'll be seeing some results? Or do you just focus on reaching the champions first, and then once you've engaged, you've made contact, then you send out the emails to the secondary people?
I think it depends on the secondary people. So in our case, secondary people could also be like champions and end users of the product. So in that case, multi-thread from the beginning. If we're talking about like CFO, procurement, CEO, I would wait until after contact has been made. You have your champions in, work on that business case, and then I think a really interesting thing is to draft a future state press release, send that to the executive, be like, hey, we're gonna drive this for you. Here's a press release. You can use that in 6 months. You're welcome. Again, oversimplified, a little bit arrogant, but that's an interesting play you can do to like get those executives kind of botted and multi-threaded early.
No, I love that. I love that. We did oversimplify it, but I think sometimes with these complex questions, you do need to. Evan, thank you so much. You rock. The last thing I'll ask you is, do you have a question for our next guest, or like a headache or a challenge that you want me to go be a research mule for you to go out and ask them?
Yeah, I would say, what are some interesting kind of non-traditional ways to reach, let's say, non-tech audiences? So everyone talks about marketing, sales, HR. How do you reach the non-tech audiences that's not just email and LinkedIn ads and maybe Google ads? Like, what are some of those like creative ideas that people have?
That's a great question. And I'm sure we're going to get a few creative answers back to that. Some person, I think it was Vasilios, when I asked him what his dream campaign would be, I think he mentioned flash mobs, which is kind of a fun way to do it. Maybe that's a bit excessive and, sink budget, but I'll include that. So, Evan, thank you so much for joining. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And we'll speak soon.
Hey, I appreciate it, Sam.